We're live.
I'm recording.
From the industrial wastelands of Michigan to the fruited plains of Iowa, this is the American Breed.
You are the dead. Remain exactly where you are. Make no move until you are ordered.
We burn them to ashes and then burn the ashes. That's our official motto.
Now we can see you. Clasp your hands behind your heads. Stand out in the middle of the room. Stand back to back.
Who can explain the fascination of fire? What draws us to it, whether we're young or old?
Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head.
And welcome to the American Breed Factory podcast. This is Nathan.
This is Conlon.
And we're still here. Still doing it. Back to work this week on my end. And it was great to be back. It's always good to be working rather than not working. Because you've got to, give the system its due because it will pay you back. So, here we are again. Big show for you tonight. Lots of great stuff. Stay tuned. It's going to get cool right at the end.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a movie where it's bad for most of it, but the end really pulls it together. I can't really say. Probably be a horror movie or something.
I can think of a lot of movies that are good and then
just fall apart. Yeah. Quick F1 update. So they're at Sochi, which is in Russia, which is the last year they're gonna do it in Sochi, because they're going to do it at a track near St. Petersburg, I think. The year after. But yeah, this is like near a beach. It's another beach race. Zandvoort was. But it's been raining. The track has been flooded for on Tuesday and Wednesday. The track was flooded.
Do they have tires for that?
No.
Swamp.
They got the full wet tires, but you can't race on a fully.
Can't hydroplane across the racetrack.
But it cleared up for today, which is when they did their testing. But tomorrow it's supposed to rain, and so they're thinking about basically if the rain comes in again, they're basically going to cancel everything on Saturday, and then on Sunday they're going to have qualifying and then the race all in one day.
Oh, that'll be fun for everyone.
Yeah. Don't wreck during qualifying.
Help you driver physical health endurance test too. Get back in that car.
And Max Verstappen is going to get a new engine, so he will start at the back of the grid. Plus, he has that 3-place grid penalty, so it doesn't matter anyways. I think in testing, Bottas was at the top of the charts as he usually is, so it looks pretty good for Bottas. He might get a race win this year. Because he is the special. Yeah, because when he was with Williams, he got a podium for Williams at Sochi, and then he's won it 3 times with Mercedes.
Okay.
Or something like that. So he's a Sochi specialist. He's also really good at Japan. There's weird tracks where it's only Bottas is really good at this track.
Huh.
I don't know. Some people are like that. It's they're nowhere in some tracks, but there's one track where it's they dominate. It's what is it about this track? I don't know. just feels right. Yeah. It's been fun. There's a bunch of podcasts I was listening to, and they're talking about the what do you call that? Speed traps, and which basically measures the fastest your car will go in F1. And they're talking about Well, actually, if you look at the data for the speed traps, like the Williams cars actually go the fastest, and it's like one because they have the Mercedes engines. Two, it's because their aero sucks. So if your aero sucks and doesn't give you enough downforce to really take those corners, you'll be really fast in a straight line because your arrow isn't very good. So a lot of times those Williams cars are really fast in straight lines, like even faster than the other cars.
Yeah, they'd be great if it was like drag cars, just straight line racing.
Because also I believe it was, and it's also a record that Bottas set in a Williams in like 2018. But the fastest an F1 car has ever gone on a track was set by Bottas. I think it was. Oh man, I want to say. I'll just look it up. I think it was like 231 miles an hour. Just fastest F1 speed. Well, he said it in two ways. There's one. Because there's one he set during testing and one he set during a race, and both were with Williams. Yeah, I'm looking to. Well, there's also another one that's fun. Let's see here. Yeah, 231 at the Mexican Grand Prix. So that was during a race, and I think he went even faster during testing at what's the place? Baku. That's it.
Okay.
So he was 233, I think, during like testing there. So yeah, Bottas has been the fastest an F1 car has ever gone, but there has been an F1 car that has gone faster than that.
And did anyone survive?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. The one guy survived. It's actually the medical car driver that did it. It was I don't know, it was like 10 years ago. They took an F1 car out to the Utah Salt Flats, and they basically just like took all the aerodynamics off the car because it was all drag. It didn't have a wing; it just had like a fin on it. And I think they called it like Project 400 because they're trying to get 400 kilometers per hour or something like that. I believe so. Yeah, because they ended up the record they ended up saying was like 397 because they had to average the speed going both ways because one the wind was assisting and one the wind was against, and so that's how they had to get the. So they took the average, but like one way it went over 400 and then the other way it went under.
Okay.
But yeah, like how fast is 400 kilometers an hour? What is that in miles per hour? There 400 kph to 248 miles per hour.
Wow. Okay.
But yeah, like F1 cars have a lot of aerodynamic stuff that keeps them away from like a really high top speed. Because technically Indy cars are faster than F1 cars, but only when you take into account the Indy 500.
Oh, okay.
Because all you're doing is just pedal in the metal and keeping the car on the track. And then at the Indy 500, I think they go like 235 miles an hour or something like that. But like where an F1 car specializes in the corners is like they can take a corner way faster than pretty much any other car in the world. So.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think that's all the F1. Oh yeah, I guess the Haas guy, you're gonna have Mazepin and Schumacher back at Haas next year.
Oh, okay.
So pretty much all the lineups are set except for one, which is the other Alfa Romeo seat.
Oh, okay.
Which it seems to be like they're going to give that to Guan Yu Zhou. But you never know. Who knows? Maybe they'll give Giovinazzi another chance. I don't know. Kind of feel bad for him because it feels like he's kind of outperformed what that car can do, but he's gonna get penalized for not winning a race or anything.
Yeah.
There's no future for you. Well, sometimes Italians are such a fervent part of F1, and he's the only Italian driver on the grid, and now you're just gonna get rid of your only Italian driver.
Have to have an Italian. How long has it been since there's been an American F1 team?
Well, I mean, the Haas is technically an American F1 team.
Oh,
Do you
okay.
mean an American F1 driver?
Well, team and driver, like, do they ever
mean,
have like, just
Uh,
Americans?
I don't know if there's an all American because when Mario Andretti won the F1 championship in like 72 or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah.
So he's the last American to win. But I think I can't even remember who he drove for. I think he might have drove for Ferrari.
I think it was Ferrari, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of like the last one. There's been a couple Americans in the sport. Like I think Stoffel Vandoor is an American, but they
It's an American sounding name.
but now he's like a reserve driver for Mercedes. I think he was with a team that like doesn't exist anymore, like Minardi or something like that.
Oh, okay.
But I think he's like the current Formula E champion. Like he's done better elsewhere, but yeah, he was the guy that was supposed to drive Lewis Hamilton's car last year when he got COVID.
Yeah, I remember that.
But they gave it to George Russell. So
Yeah. Have American automakers ever been in F1? I don't think they have, or maybe a long time ago.
Ford made an engine for Williams. Ford made a championship engine for Williams.
Yeah, Ford owned Cosworth for a while. I know that.
Okay, yeah, they've been in there. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if that was, but auto companies have been, yeah, American auto companies don't do a lot of motorsports. I mean, they do, of course, stock car and stuff like that, but yeah, they've kind of backed away from that.
Yeah.
Of course, American auto companies are a lot smaller than they used to be also.
But yeah, F1 changes a lot of stuff next year, so it's supposed to be more appealing to manufacturers. Like, hey, it's not as expensive.
Yeah, you don't have an extra $1 billion laying around to get into this and build a ground up vehicle that will compete with everyone else and also follow this most mercurial set of rules you could ever imagine.
But it looked like Porsche and was it Volks? No. Porsche's part of Volkswagen,
or is it part of Volkswagen? Yeah, it's part of Volkswagen. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I can't remember. I think it's Porsche and Volvo or somebody like that, or not Volvo. Audi. I think it's Porsche and Audi are looking to maybe get into F1, but they're talking to both of them, but it seems to be mainly for their next engine change, which is going to be in 5 years, and.
Okay.
Who the hell knows what engine they're going to change it to? Because they're not going to use the hybrids anymore, but they're thinking about going hydrogen.
Okay, that'll be interesting.
The
humanity!
There's like two ways to do hydrogen powered cars, and one of them is basically a combustion engine car. It's just use hydrogen, and it's like very loud and dirty, but you can get the power up. And then the other way is basically using the hydrogen to create electrical energy, and it's basically more of an electrical engine than a combustion engine.
Yeah, Volkswagen's betting big on hydrogen.
Yeah,
They're not doing a lot of battery stuff. They think hydrogen's going to be the way.
That's why Honda is getting out of F1, because they don't see a future in hybrid engines.
You know, Hondas might be leaving North America.
Huh.
I don't know if that's true, but I heard that it's like, because they don't have a strong lineup of profitable trucks and SUVs.
Yeah.
And they're just thinking like, yeah, this might not be worth it. Because two of the biggest markets here, supposedly by 2030, you can't sell cars with internal combustions, which is California and New York. But everyone says that, but 2030 is a lot closer than you think. You're talking about developing world-changing technology, which does not exist yet. So that's But there's a lot of weird.
I don't
I mean,
what they taking those like, hey, we're gonna have all these electrical cars. Did they somebody has to do the math about like whether the electrical grid can actually handle that, right?
yeah, that's what Biden's infrastructure plan is, to include a lot of that. But
Okay.
it does. See, the problem is you need, and I've heard this. This is my opinion. I'm not making it up or talking out of my ass. This opinion of other experts is you need a lot of nuclear horsepower, especially in America, because we're so spread out. If you want that intense, like 240 volt, or I'm sorry, 150 amp charging stations that it will take to get cars going, where you're not waiting around 5 hours for your car to charge at a charging station, and you need a lot. You need a what they call a strong base load to do that. And right now we don't have it. No one in the world has it.
Well, I thought. Well, I may have getting my electricity wrong, but like, I thought like the way our grid works is like we use like less voltage, but we have more transforming stations. And then in Europe they have like higher voltage, so they have to use less infrastructure, but it's also more dangerous.
It's cheaper to run like 220, I think, because only us and Japan we run 120. Japan can run 90 in some places. But you can change that around, because everything comes out of the power stations at like very high voltage and then gets stepped down. So we could make incremental changes to that, but we need a lot of, because how it works is like a guy explained like power grids and alternating currents is you basically have two lines. You have a high power line and a low power line. And you need your high power stuff to run like factories, light up cities, stuff, things that use a lot of energy. And then your low power stuff is like housing and things like that. Most of us don't have like 480 running into our house because we're not running welding shops or something out of it. But in order to plug in a comparable amount of cars and charge them effectively, you need a really strong base load. That's why Japan, because they said they're going to get rid of all nuclear power, and they've never done it because they have no way to generate power effectively to power, I mean, you ever seen Tokyo from a satellite at night? It's like a column of light, it's a massive city, and they have no way of powering stuff like that. I mean, they could burn coal and shit, but that's the problem. And remember, there's more energy potential in a pound of uranium than there is in a billion tons of coal. So it's like insanely.
And technically, like if you don't let crap out of your nuclear reactor, the coal that gets burned, for every ton of it, there's more nuclear isotopes that are put in the air than it would be a nuclear reactor. So.
Yeah, coal's terrifying when you realize what they're doing with it. It's also just really cheap.
Yeah,
it's just, that's the only reason. It's just cheap. It's just crap you dig out of the ground. It's just, what is coal? It's like fossilized trees, something like that. But there's a reason it's energy dense, and it's just cheap. It's just like rock you dig out, and you can do it. I mean, you don't have to mine for it anymore. You can just scrape the ground away with giant scrapes until you find it. But it's horrible, bad shit to burn. If there was some way they could re-burn it or filter some of that shit out, but there's no system known to science that can do that. That's not like, you just build a nuclear reactor for a lot cheaper. Trying to make, because then wasn't the industry trying to foist that myth on everyone, like clean coal, and it's like there's no such thing.
You probably have to get because I know you'd have to get like rocket scientists on that, because they're like, that's the only thing I know of where like you can take like the exhaust of the rocket and recycle it back into the rocket and be more efficient with it. Like, at least Russians are the only people I know who do that super efficiently. But
those are called, what's that called? Turbo pumping, or there's a name for that. But
that's a rocket engine, not an energy
material. That's to produce a lot of energy very quickly and to focus it in one direction. But you just need, the most densely powerful, potent stuff we have to generate energy is like uranium. Like that's if you fission that, you're burning like, I forget what you get for a kilowatt hour, but I've seen all these. Well, I've listened to all these guys talk, and everyone who seems to like, we want some kind of future and we don't want to destroy the whole planet, they all say nuclear power, but everyone gets the collywobbles about it because then they watch Chernobyl and they're like, well, that's what we're going to do. And it's like, no, it's not. Um, it's one of those things like, except in certain circumstances, and it has a very safe rating. I mean, it's actually, for the amount of energy it's produced, it's had very few side effects. But the side effects it does have and the waste it does generate is like, it's horrifying. You can't do anything with it. It's not yet. They say we can reburn some of that or reuse some of that stuff. I don't know. But yeah, if people want all this stuff, again, circling back to the original point, like if you want everyone to plug in cars and charge them in a reasonable amount of time, you're going to need a lot of nuclear power. And I don't think anyone's willing to accept that. They just think, we'll just put up more windmills. And it's like, no.
Yeah, we haven't built a new nuclear power plant since the 60s, right? Or has there been a new one?
Since the 80s, I think.
Okay.
They haven't issued a permit to build a new one, and no one would build a new one at this point because of the regulatory apparatuses around it, because it costs $1 billion to build a relatively small, safe, like American style nuclear reactor or something they build in Japan or something, and it costs like $10 billion to decommission them. Like, no companies can absorb that cost realistically. But everything they're using now is what they call Generation 3. And Generation 4, they all have it on the books. They know how to do it. But now they're just like, fuck that. We're going to Generation 5, which is like what you call your community reactors, which are run by computers remotely. And they're not like massive complexes or something. And it looks like your waste. It's all, it doesn't require a lot of manpower. Some of the fuels they're making now, you don't need to refuel the reactor for decades. The biggest problems are maintenance, because when you're boiling that much water constantly and you're just pulling it out of rivers or whatever, it eats you got to reline things and replace things. I mean, I'm not an expert on nuclear reactor maintenance.
Well, also,
but I know if this...
I think we're like, I don't know how the progress is ongoing, but I remember like, it was like 7 years ago, like Lockheed Martin and some German companies like, in 10 years, we're going to have fusion. And I don't know how the progress is, but I know they're progressing on it. And those fusion reactors look super cool.
We signed some treaty with the Russians. This was one of the last treaties that Gorbachev and Reagan signed. There's a place in France, which is I forget. It's called ITER, and that's an acronym for something. But it's basically was to research fusion, and to do it under the principles they were talking about. Then you have to generate electrical plasma, which is like very energy intensive, and then and sustain that, because you're still using the same concept with fusion that you are with nuclear energy. You just want to get water hot to drive steam turbines. That's essentially, there's no like direct plug into the top of the fusion reactor and it produces electrical energy. You still have to drive dynamos to do it. And fusion produces a lot of heat, but it also is kind of beyond our material science to contain, because fusion is the sun. That's like, you see it every day. It's like, we know it works. Hydrogen and helium can fuse for billions of years and produce a lot of energy, but we can't contain the sun. Or maybe we'll build a Dyson sphere around it and just plug it all back to Earth. Who knows? Just live inside the Earth. But yeah, those are very. When you actually look at like how much energy we can produce, and then what it would take to do things with that energy, it's like, we're just so checkmated by thermodynamics and the laws of conservation and stuff. It's like, yeah, none of the Star Trek shit's ever going to happen because it would just take, massive amounts of energy. But, it's still cool to think about. I mean, yeah, everyone thought history was over in the 1890s too. So it was like, yeah, we proved that wasn't the case.
This is the pinnacle of mankind.
They really thought it was too. Yeah. That no more wars, no more conflict. It's like mankind has solved all its problems. Steam will lead us into the future, and we'll just continue to build on this. And and for the great powers in the world, it seemed to make sense at the time. But then, the World War I came along, and the Depression, and then World War II, and then.
Nowadays, they'd be surprised about how smart and how stupid we are at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, you have all this information in front of you. Like when the internet started, I remember it's like sum total of the world's information will be available to all, and it's like, yeah, and they'll make up conspiracy theories and elect Donald Trump. And that's just what's going on in America. There's as much dumb going on everywhere else too. It's just this is the dumb I know.
Billions of people. At least millions of them have to be idiots.
Oh yeah, just walk into walls, idiots. Oh, speaking of which, not to get too deep into politics, but the recount was completed in Nevada. Remember where they said that they're going to stop the steal, and they paid had all these people come in and recount these votes by hand, and the results were Biden got 635 more votes than he had before. So, hail victory, or whatever those Nazi guys were saying about Trump. It's like, yep, you showed us. I'm working on a new model right now. Working on this. I don't know how clearly that's coming through.
There we go.
But this is the Das Werk. How do they say it? Untersee Boat U-9. This is a World War I U-boat. And they not only do they give me a great model, but they have like an English and German history of this particular boat and some of the things it did, which were it's pretty amazing when you think that like guys got on submarines using World War I tech. I mean, this was laid down in 1908 and went into service in 1910. And it used a 8-cylinder primary engine and 2 6-cylinder secondary engines to charge Siemens Schuckert batteries and motors. And these were not diesel because they couldn't make diesel engines that were stable enough to operate in variable environments at that time. So these were like gas engines under the water, which, I mean, they weren't running them under the water because they have a big stack that comes up on it when it's time to charge. I mean, this thing, its maximum, its crush depth was 50 meters. So these weren't going deep. But for the time, this is pre-sonar and everything. Like, yeah, they could do a lot of damage with the right people in them, and if everything worked right, which it seldom did. This U-boat, U-9, is famous because it's the first U-boat that ever successfully reloaded its torpedo tubes at sea. That was not usually. They had a lot of problems trying to get they could fire, because this has 2 forward firing tubes and 2 aft firing tubes, and they could always fire 4, but then they couldn't reload them. Well, these guys figured out how to reload them.
Huh.
And over the course of its career, it sunk over 15 British vessels and an Imperial Russian merchant ship. It sank the battle cruiser HMS Hawk. It sank the these were called armored cruisers. To me, they look like miniature battleships, but this was the age when like the giant dreadnoughts were the king of the sea, and
yeah,
these were pretty big ships. They weren't dreadnoughts, but they were big, and this thing sank. He killed 1,800 British sailors with this kind of weird contraption. And at the time of World War I, the Germans were way behind everyone else in quantity of U-boats. So they really had a crash development program to catch up. And of course, being German and being really good engineers, they made some of the best in the world. I mean, because we had a bunch, but you're taking your life in your own hands going out at them. The British actually perceived a submarine gap, and so they created steam-powered submarines, which were really they didn't last too long.
we made a hand grenade for under the ocean.
Yeah, they were weird-looking ships. They had a big bulb on the front of them where the steam thing ran, and because they could only run those engines above water to charge batteries.
Yeah,
but these things created a terrible sight problems and stuff, and they were hard to navigate. And I think there was a battle. It was called the battle. What was it called? The Battle of the something islands. But there was no battle there. It was just these ships and British cruisers crashing into them because they couldn't navigate properly. And see, the reason they went to steam power was the British Admiralty said U-boat or submarines have to go 21 knots, and they couldn't make because you remember this was in World War One and the interwar years where this happened, so they couldn't make ships that could consistently hold 21 knots submarines, under with the kind of engines they had. So that's why they went with steam, because the steam could definitely turn the shafts and keep them fast enough, but it also just was wildly dangerous. Imagine being inside that thing, big steam boiler running, and you're confined. They were called the K1 class. It didn't last very long.
But anyway, plugs you're in fire for your whole life.
Yeah. Well, anyway, back to the U9. It had a lot of very interesting features, and it's a really great model. And like I said, they gave me a whole encyclopedia of history, and it came in English and German, so I could actually read it. Because I've gotten stuff from other model makers where they have these nice books they make, and it's like, well, this is all in another language. I can sit there with my phone, but Das Werk does a good job with their models, because they're all designed and engineered in Germany. I think they farm them out to TACOM to make the actual model, because they have the TACOM sprue count system where it's A, B, C, D, E, and then after E it goes A, A, B, B, C. So it's like I recognize the system because it's the same letters and same letter type. But yeah, it's pretty big. This is my second submarine, because I built that Revel submarine. That was the World War II U-boat. I'm thinking I'm liking submarines more and more. There's a lot of detail on them, especially the ones from this era. Like a modern submarine would just be a cylinder with a mast on it. There's not many features.
Yeah,
because this was way before quiet mattered, and they didn't have they couldn't really make metal into those big tubular shapes back then, at least not cost effectively. Because a lot of these submarines from World War II, that those aren't like solid one-piece hulls. They're riveted together with rivets. That's how they made. That's why they only went down. I think that was 160 feet or something, 50 meters. I'm not sure, something like that. But yeah, that's submarines didn't start getting crazy until the Russians came along. Let's make a double hull titanium submarine. I mean, it'll be as loud as a bunch of hammers being rolled around in a cement mixer, but you can't outdive it, you can't outrun it. It's that's how that'll work.
Well, you can run into it and it'll be okay.
Yeah, we've crashed into them before, but our ships never sunk either, and they weren't made out of titanium. But
no, the Russians had the materials for titanium, but we had the better material science, so we didn't have to make them double hulled.
Oh.
I believe that was it.
Yeah, it was something about materials, because we looked at titanium and stuff, and I guess the way it conducted sound was not favorable for us, because we use I forget what I don't know now. I know the Cold War stuff. I don't know what they're doing. They're probably making them out of ceramic now, but
yeah, it's Joe Buff ones.
Yeah, ceramic submarines that can dive 8,000 feet and stuff.
They find it by the complete lack of sound. That's a submarine because it's absolutely making no sound. A hole in the ocean.
But yeah, we crashed into them a few times, and
because I remember I think it was in Blind Man's Bluff where they talk about they had a meeting of the American and Russian subs, and I was on this sub. It's oh, we thought we killed you guys because we heard popcorn sounds and the hull was popping. It's yeah, that was the first hull popping. The second hull is fine.
Yeah. Well, there was that one off the coast of Florida we ran into, and its reactor, seawater started reacting with the fuel because they used liquid fueled missiles, and it was basically filled the ship with sulfuric acid gas. And there's no filters you can put in a mask it'll just eat the filters.
Yeah. And
so those guys were trying to surface to vent it, and then someone in a destroyer said they're opening missile compartments to fire missiles, and it's no, it came really close to being something bad. because they were just going to sink it because they thought it was opening its missile hatches to vent the sulfuric acid gas that was. And I think that was in the 70s. I don't know if the Russians still. I don't think they use liquid fuel in their rockets anymore. Because there was a guy whose job was to go down there with a mop and mop under the missiles and get all the liquid rocket fuel that was leaking out, and then they would mix it with water and like put it out into the sea. Because you couldn't smoke or anything around because it just exploded as rocket fuel. And we were using solid rocket fuel since like the 60s. But the Russians didn't want to invest the money into the cost of that, so it's like, I'll just send them out with a nuclear reactor and slopping around in the sea. Just make them liquid fuel. Because we learned about the ultimate weakness of liquid fuel from remember the Damascus Titan missile disaster. The guy dropped the wrench and the rocket, the launch bay filled with rocket fuel. Caught on fire. Yeah, that was from Command and Control.
Oh.
Those were the last liquid-fueled missiles we had, were the big Titan missiles that had like multi-megaton warheads. It was like the last warhead like that we had. And in 1980, the guy dropped the wrench, and it punctured the side of the missile, and then the missile caught on fire. And they were like, "Will the warheads detonate?" It's like, we don't know. Probably not, but... yeah, so we stopped using liquid fuel. I don't even know if the shit we send up into space is liquid anymore, is it?
You can. I'm not sure what, like, because they're usually solid rocket boosters, which means it's like some sort of peroxide or whatever.
Yeah, weird shit.
Yeah.
It's like, you wouldn't think that'd be flammable. Not if you mix it with liquid oxygen, it is. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just more oxygen. That's all we need. Because you need there's two agents. You need an oxidizer and something else, a fuel.
Catalyzer?
Yeah, something like that. And
yeah,
that's how rocket engines work. But there's different ones. There are liquid fuel rocket engines, but they use... because I'm not sure, like... Because like I said before, like the in-atmosphere rockets are different from your outside the Earth rockets. Your what do you call it?
Exo-atmospheric rocket.
Yes. So they can have different makeups. So I'm not sure like, when they're using thrusters in space, like what fuel they're using there or not.
I don't know. All I know is the Nazis were the first people into space accidentally. They were the first people to send something up into space. It was one of their V2 rockets. Went off course. It just kept going straight up. They didn't know at the time. I mean, they did, but they weren't. It wasn't the objective of it. So those are wildly dangerous. I've read a lot of books about that. Well, I mean, yeah, read Gravity's Rainbow. You'll learn everything you want to know about a V2 rocket. Those were fun to refuel or to fuel and launch.
Yeah.
So weird how they figured all that out. And we did not understand that at all, how they were doing it. I mean, we did loosely, but we really had no idea. But then we made a nuclear bomb, so it's like, yeah, that's weird. But we had plenty of time. Our cities weren't being bombed to rubble and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, that was the main people we captured were V1 rocket. Like, that's why Werner von Braun worked at NASA and stuff. I was like, we need you guys. Weirdly enough, the guy who invented it was an American. Like, the first rocket was made by a guy named Goddard. Like, a lot of people don't know that. He was farming it out to the Army and the inner warriors between World War I and World War II, and the U.S. Army was like, it's all Buck Rogers shit. It's never So he went to Germany and presented his work, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's cool, man. Maybe we'll look at that one day." They basically took everything he did and made. They made more like the V1 rockets off of what he did, which were just really cool, weird engines. But they weren't like the V2, like that's more what a rocket is nowadays. The V1s were just weird. Just a what do they call those, pump jet engines or something? The ones that go wah, and they weren't scary while they were making noise. It's when they stopped. It's like, oh, now it's falling. So yeah, rockets and submarines. Check it out.
Cool stuff.
Yeah. Stuff way beyond my understanding. I even look at this stuff, like this World War I stuff, because that book they gave me has like the schematics of like, this is where they lived. This is how the engines were built. This is how, these were the cables and these cables that were charging these batteries, they ran off these big dynamos, and they have pictures of them. And they actually have one of these engines in a museum where they can restart it. They just put it back together recently, and they can start one of these things. Those cables were just copper wires this thick, real high voltage coming out of those dynamos attached to these engines, wrapped in cloth. Like, there's not a lot of plastic present in this or anything. Everything was like crazy, World War I stuff where it's like switches that are metal, big metal switches and stuff you'd never, just for weight alone, you wouldn't have that. And
it's kind of like when you see steampunk stuff, but this was like an actual working
this was
steampunk
real
thing.
steampunk stuff. Because to start one of these engines in a submarine floating on the surface, you put the stack up, and then you fill a vessel. You have an even smaller engine that's just like an air compressor, and you fill this giant vessel that can hold like 80 bar of air, compressed air. And then you fire that into the engine just to get it moving. Like it's just the air pressure that moves it. And then you slowly introduce fuel. Like a guy's running around hitting all these knobs because it's slowly introducing fuel into the engine. And but if you do that, you got to introduce the fuel slowly, and then you turn the spark on. And each one of these things has a spark arrestor on the top of it. So some guy's running around doing that. But if you do it wrong, it'll just explode because you're shooting high pressure air into there. The pistons are all moving like this, but there's nothing going on until you introduce the gas and spark. But you got to do that in a certain order because it'll just fill with gas fumes and the whole thing will explode like a big bomb on a submarine. But yeah, they started this thing up in the museum, and I was like, that is the craziest way to start. And I guess the reason they did that is they didn't really have, like nowadays they start big diesel engines. They got, or any kind of, well, these weren't diesel, but any kind of big engine, they just have a starter motor, which is a small motor hooked to a flywheel. It's a high torque engine. Well, they didn't really have that back then. Or if they did, it was as big as a house. So you had to use compressed air and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, this is wild. And their average time to dive was 7 minutes. Like if someone's like, oh, we see a ship, dive. Nowadays it's like, it immediately goes down. Even in World War II, they went down pretty fast. No, these guys are running around flipping dials, turning cranks, and But once they go underwater, they had no effective way to find them. Because these guys didn't fire like from under the water, and the torpedoes didn't corkscrew around and track. No, it was pretty much line of sight. This torpedo is going to travel at this speed.
Yeah, it had to be surface to fire it.
Yeah, you couldn't fire it from under the water. And the main way they destroyed submarines in World War I was like deck guns. So they'd wait. They'd be just all guys with big goggles looking around, and they'd wait because these things had to surface all the time. They couldn't be underwater for great lengths of time, and then they'd just start firing. I think it was called the 20-inch deck gun or whatever. That's how you destroyed a submarine in World War I. Because I think they had depth charges, but they weren't very. Like they were more dangerous to be on the ship. They didn't have good fusing apparatuses for them. So, but yeah, they're just guys with big scopes looking around. It's like, and it was eyesight. There was no sensing equipment or nothing. And yeah, it's just like, fire the gun over there. Wait, that's fishermen. Well.
And they probably didn't have like enough seaplanes or anything to do reconnaissance.
If they did, they didn't have an effective way to range it because their radio. They had wireless radios then, but they didn't have a great range. So they have to be very close to the ship to target it, or they drop like a buoy or something. Yeah, it's amazing how it used to work. And that people lived in environments like that. And that they sunk, mini ships with devices. I mean, just things this primitive, like, it was all just manual.
Yeah, because that stuff's not cheap, and it was worth it to build it.
Oh yeah. If you can sink 15 ships with a submarine, it's like, yeah, it's worth it. But yeah, submarines were very expensive to build back then. The seals alone, one of the big problems they had was with loading. The thing about the big reason it was a big deal this could reload its torpedo tubes at sea was because you had to come to a certain depth, and the operator had to read these two dials that weren't necessarily in his eyesight. And because you got to remember, they had to use actual rubber seals back then, like from rubber trees. And those were notoriously, brackish water was notoriously corrosive on those. So you had to make sure when you open that tube to reload it, that the other side wasn't leaking or open to the sea even, because there wasn't like a proximity switch that was going to tell you. And that's why it was dangerous to reload these things at sea, because you could just be opening a door to the sea. And it's like, well, that's it. But the Germans had an interesting system where they had gates that would close in front of the torpedo tubes. So if they weren't properly closed, the gates wouldn't go in right, and then the guy could look from the top and see. It's like, okay, the hatch is ajar somehow. Now the ones on the back were just dangerous. It was because corrosion was the big enemy of these things, and in World War II also, it was like things would corrode because of the seawater and
here's salt water and metal.
Well, it's like even the most modern, like American nuclear submarine, where the shaft goes out the back. Your life still depends on a rubber seal about that big around. And now they have a lot of redundant systems, and we haven't lost one because of that. But when you're aware of that fact, that this spinning shaft has this rubber seal that sits on it, and if that fucks up, you're going to start taking on a lot of water. But back then, it was even worse. Some of these shafts were like machined by some dude, just running a thing along a lathe, and a lathe that was probably being pumped by foot or run by, big bands of steel, or those big leather bands that used to run everything back in the, the old steampunk days.
Yeah.
They have a mock-up of that at the Henry Ford Village, and they have pictures. Because it actually runs, like you can't walk in there, of course, because it's wildly dangerous. These big wheels and leather belts spinning and the steam engine outside. But they show pictures from that time, and one of the jobs kids could get was to continuously oil the shaft as it was spinning. And it's like, you had to have your feet on either side of this thing and lean over into it and hope that you didn't get your leg caught in that thing, or that you get wrapped around the whole works. And like that was considered acceptable and normal back then. It's like, the small hands, they can get in there and lubricate that. It's like, that's crazy.
I mean, I saw this video of like a guy, he's like working like a shaft for an oil pump.
Oh, you mean the oil wells where they're digging down?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's tremendously dangerous.
Yeah. Well, as well as like guys working together, and they're like adding more like stuff to the drill, and like dudes like have a chain and he's just like throwing it on there and it's like whipping around and they're taking it off. But then no, there's this other video of like some dude is like in a room where there's the shaft and he's supposed to do something. He does it wrong. He gets sucked into the shaft and it happens so fast. It's like, oh wait, that was a person that just died. They just got immediately disintegrated by a spinning shaft. Like, what the hell happened?
There's a video of a guy in I think it's in Russia, it's in Siberia, and they're doing that kind of shaft mining or drilling for oil. And, a section would come down and he wraps this big lock thing around, and then a guy comes in and helps him, and they move it, and then they loosen that lock thing up. It swings out of the way on an armature, and the shaft gets pounded down, and then another shaft comes in, and he's like working on the machine too that's feeding the shafts up. And then the whole head that feeds the shaft like cuts loose, like the thing that's pressing them down into the ground. Now he doesn't get killed, but he starts looking around because the whole room, because that shaft is spinning at thousands of RPMs, and the whole rig starts to do this, and you see him climbing up a ladder, and the whole shaft head driver comes down. I don't know what it's called, but it's like, oh yeah, that just cost a couple $1 million. Yeah, those guys that work on those guys that are slapping those drivers on those shafts and stuff, like, yeah, you couldn't pay me enough. So I've seen a lot of videos where that goes wrong. That thing they have locked up on there, they get like feedback through the shaft and it starts spinning around. All of a sudden, 5 guys are like, whoa, and you know someone's getting their back broken or something. That goddamn thing swinging around like that. Yeah, it's amazing how dangerous some of that work still is. And those cargo, have you ever seen the cargo ship videos? Where it's those giant cargo ships that are just covered with boxes.
Yeah.
When they hit rough seas, and when they're those things that have them moored down snap loose, and those boxes start rolling around. You know, those weigh several tons.
Yeah.
They're just flopping around, going off the side, and they start falling off the side of the ship. I think it's in South Korea, and then the whole ship starts listing over because all the weight's moving that way. I'm like, yeah, fuck that. It ended up sinking, but so much of it was under the water while all that stuff fell off. I was like, oh, there's no way this thing's going to make it. And then it pops back up. Now, they lost half the shit that was on the ship, but it's like, oh, those must have been some crazy seas to move something like that. Well, those things weigh. It's impossible, a preposterous amount of weight, I'm sure.
Yeah. I always like that. Like I always wanted to like see some simulation of like an aircraft carrier just like hitting some huge waves. Like, what's a tsunami wave going to do to an aircraft carrier? I imagine something bad, but like I just want to see it, man.
You know, you never hear of it. So it's either they don't talk about it or they have contingencies. Or maybe they don't.
Usually like an aircraft carrier and the whole like carrier group has like very sophisticated weather radars, and they just move around it.
Oh, okay.
But they can know what the sea is like. But yeah, usually you don't see like some aircraft carrier in like rough seas or whatever.
Yeah, just like riding it out. Like, what was that thing called? About the lobster guys. That
Perfect Storm.
Yeah, you don't see like an aircraft carrier climbing away. I mean, I just learned recently that aircraft carriers don't have those big wheels in them anymore. Like, I still thought there was some dude that was spinning a wheel or something. It's like, no, they're like little hydraulic controls.
Yeah.
But then you transfer that into how big the rudder is for that ship. It's like, oh, that's insane. That's like, how do they do that? It's just powerful motors. But well, here's something. Here's a YouTube rabbit hole to go down. Watch anchor drop fail videos.
Oh, like when the chain breaks and you just see and like the shit's catching on fire. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
They don't say which one, but it's obviously the U.S. Navy, because it's people in those Navy uniforms with those big ear things on, and they're under the deck, and it is an aircraft carrier. You can tell because the links to the chain are about as big as a car. There's just not too many ships that have anchors that big, and these guys were all in like U.S. Navy uniforms. But I guess what they said in the description, what happens is the brake that's supposed to come on to slow the anchor as it drops failed.
Yeah.
So those anchors were just freewheeling down into the water. And that whole compartment was like bang, 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 bang. And you see these chains that are, like I said, as big as a car. And all of a sudden, they're just a blur. And the paint's catching on fire. And the sparks are going everywhere. And it's like, oh, this is insane. And the people are just standing there like, like, yeah, you run. There's something bad is going on. But yeah, that's... I've seen there's all kinds of ones from like Navy stuff to like those giant freighters have that, and those fuck up. And yeah, the clutch catches on fire, and the guys are all like running away, screaming in some foreign language. It's like, yeah, this is really wild. But I don't think I've seen them all. I've watched a lot of them. That's when Stacy comes in. What do you do? What is this? It's like anchor drop fail. We might need to know this information someday,
Yeah, I kind of missed the show. It was on the History Channel. It was like catastrophic failures or something like that.
Oh yeah, they had several of those. Man moment machine, stuff like that.
yeah. Actually, I think there's a subreddit called catastrophic failure, which that's kind of like the fix you get, because you even get crazier stuff that you want to see on the History Channel, where it's just like, here's a moment in time. It's like, does anybody have information on like how this happened? And all that. It's like, nope.
Nope,
here's extreme failure.
I'm just curious about like the ones I've seen where it's like you see Russian characters in the corner of this grayscale video camera that's shooting this, or even in color. And it's like, oh, they're getting ready to like they have a crucible, and it's like they're getting ready to pour it. And like I've seen that. Like I've never done it, but I have some concept of what should happen. And all of a sudden, like the crucible comes forward, and then like all the material, the molten steel rushes out of it all at once, like covers the floor. There's no people around. This is being done by machines, but it's like, what just happened there? It's like, why is this room full of lava? Or the thing where that makes the steel rod.
Yeah.
Okay, you know how that works? That comes off of like a slab rolling machine, and then there's dies that it's forced into that progressively compress it down to whatever size you need it, and then it's supposed to shoot out the other end and get coiled around something. Well, sometimes that fucks up, or one of the compressors breaks, and then a hot bolt of steel just starts shooting through the air. It looks like silly string from hell. And there's guys running around, and, but it's a solid mass of steel, so it coils up like silly string or something. It's like, that's almost funny, except that's like, 1,800 degrees and, under a really high pressure, and it fail. It's like, oh, if that touches you, it's going to just cut your arm off. But yeah, that's that's weird.
I always think the craziest ones are some Wrath of God shit is just like sinkhole disasters.
Yeah.
They're digging like a tunnel underneath like a river, and like there's a breach, and there's just a sinkhole's created and 80 people are killed, and just like
I always like the ones that freak me out is like there's a lot of these from Germany and Norway and places where they have a lot of dams, and it's like opening the sluice gates, but you see on the other side it's just this giant hole, this vortex that's created of water, and that freaks me out. Is like, oh, there's a guy there in a boat. It's like, there's no way, because they're just opening the gates and it's sucking all this water through, and whatever mechanism is down there, whatever hole is down there, is suddenly just sucking the water down, but it creates like a little cyclone. It's really weird. And this is on huge scale too. These are just huge dams, and it's like, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that. Oh. And they have the ones where they a lot of the stuff's from Russia.
yeah,
Russia
yeah.
and China have the weirdest industrial things going on, where they just empty the crucibles down the side of a hill. There's a bunch of impurities in them, so they just get everything red hot in there, and then this train is like, I mean, we have that at my work. There's a train that goes around with a giant crucible on it, and it's full of liquid metal, and it just moves around. And whenever I think I'm hot or I'm having a bad day, I notice the guy driving the train is wearing a spacesuit made of that silver stuff, because a crucible full of thousands of tons of steel is behind him, and he's just driving a train. So they're doing this in Russia and China too, but unlike here, when the crucible is just full of crap and they want to get rid of it, they just pour it off the side of the train. They just pull up the train and hit the lever, and then the crucible slowly goes down, and then it flows down. And in one of these videos, there's water down there, like a creek.
Yeah.
And it just hits the water, and it's like somebody's throwing sticks of dynamite, and boom, boom, boom. And it's like, where are they doing this, and why?
Quick, nobody's looking. Just dump it somewhere.
Oh, they had like one of the largest steelworks in the world is somewhere in China, and has a name like Gobakan Steelworks or something. And it wasn't even a picture of like any disaster happening. It was just a guy who lived there, and it was Sunday, and it was like they weren't running the steel mill, but they were starting it up. And so he had his camera out the window in like stop motion between Sunday and Monday, Monday, it looked like a fog had moved in, like you've never seen. And he was narrating in Chinese, but they had translations on the bottom. This is not fog. This is what this city is like 6 days a week. It's just this black, mist that's all over the place. You couldn't see in front of your face. It was like, is that fog? Like, no, that's not fog. And we used to do that here too, but because there's a full steel mill running across from me, and I've never seen fog like that. I'm sure the air is not great, but never seen it like that. The cool thing is when they burn out the stack, though. I forget how many days they do that, but there's just this blue column of flame shooting up in the air. And when you come in there and it's dark still, like especially in the fall, like in the winter and stuff, when it gets dark, stays dark for a long time, you just see this column of blue flame rising up in the air. And it's like kind of cool. Or then the orange flame that'll shoot out sometime. It's like, oh, that's neat. I don't know what they're doing, but is it supposed to do that?
The fire tornado. Is there supposed to be a fire tornado?
Yeah. Well, they're decommissioning that plant, though, so pretty soon it won't be there. Because, when they raised the tariffs on steel, it was going to help all these places stay in business, and they took all the money and promptly closed them all. But there's something weird about the steel plant across from us because it's not owned by Ford anymore. It was owned by Severstal, and now I think it's owned by another Russian company. And we've basically made it impossible for the Russians to operate businesses here. So I think they're decommissioning it because they were going to try to sell it, but nobody wanted it. We want it, but we just want the empty floor space to store shit because we're slowly buying it back. We're moving that way. We're just going to use it to store shit. We don't want any of the steel mill shit there because we get all our steel from, I forget where we get it from, somewhere in Pennsylvania or something. We get the pellets. The pellet carrier trains. You ever seen those?
No.
The ones that they're the ones that look like there's like a 6-pack of pop cans, and but it's a train moving. Those have steel pellets in them.
Okay.
And that's the most efficient way to make and transport steel that's not formed.
Huh.
Oh, yeah, they're just like they look like little dog biscuits, like about this big. And you fire a shotgun into the bottom of the thing if it ever gets plugged. It's a special made one, but it's made by like Winchester or something.
Yeah.
But you're shooting it's like a brass slug, and it's on a mount. It doesn't look like a shotgun at all. It looks like because you bolt it to the thing and hook it up. I don't know. There's a video on YouTube of them using that too. But no disaster happened. It's just...
They haven't put on forgotten weapons yet?
No. Well, like I said, it doesn't look like a shotgun. The only thing that looks like a shotgun is the long barrel on it, but it's a real long barrel because you're at the bottom of this, like a furnace.
Just Ian looking at it. Well, this technically isn't a weapon, but it fires a shotgun shell.
Well, it fires a 10-gauge shotgun shell with a brass solid in it. You wouldn't want to be hit by this.
It just looks like the stand for a fan. And some rotating...
Well, you fire it with a crank. It's like a weird. It's just like those nail drivers that use like blank shells. You ever seen those? Those framing guns and stuff. It's how you pound.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they have the little blanks in it. Yeah, it's just a gun. Because guys on YouTube because to make those work, you have to press them on something. That's the safety, and then it fires the bolt and drives it into whatever. Well, the guys on YouTube are like bypassing that and putting stuff in the end. Let's shoot stuff with these. And of course, it's a wildly inefficient, stupid way to do things because they were firing at like a target at 10 feet, and they were all the way to the bottom, to the left, to the top, randomly. Like there was no control over which way it was going because it was just driving a piston forward. That's what was throwing the projectile out. So. It's like, yeah, that kind of RAM set equipment's like $300. You guys are just buying it and tearing it apart. It's like, what? This seems like a horrible waste of time and money to accomplish nothing.
Yeah, that's how they in one of the seasons of The Wire is when they have like the guys that are just disappearing other gang members and like the dilapidated housing. They board up the they board up the housing with one of those nail guns because they didn't have power. There's no power in the buildings to power a nail gun, but like this thing just uses a bullet. So it's like, yeah, so that's how they're able to discover that stuff. It's like, well, this is a very specific nail gun.
Yeah.
Where'd they get this?
No, they're called ram setters, and they use it mainly for driving stuff into concrete. But anyway, I watched a movie this week.
Yes.
Watched the Coen Brothers' 1984 Blood Simple.
Their first movie.
Yes, and it was independently funded. Stars John Getz, Francis McDormand, Dan Hedaya, Emmett Walsh, and
That's the main bits. There's other people around.
yeah, Emmett Walsh kind of stole the show.
Oh yeah. I don't think I've ever seen. I mean, I've seen him do good stuff, but this is probably like a tour de force of like just a jolly, scary person.
Yeah, someone who seems funny but is really just cold-hearted.
Yeah.
And a very young Francis McDormand.
Yeah.
And then John Getz, the other main character. I really don't know much about him.
Nah.
He's from. He went to the University of Iowa.
I don't know. He's probably like the weak link of the movie, being that he's a main character.
Yeah.
But, this is like everybody's first movie, so these are like all the people they're hanging out with, except for Emmett Walsh, who seem to be kind of like combative. Well, some of the trivia makes him seem combative. I don't know, but like apparently the Coen brothers were trying to order him around to do some stuff, and and he was like, my character wouldn't do that. And like, can you just humor us? And like, I'm humoring you by doing this fucking movie.
Yeah. I'm not getting like, there's no $3 million payday in this part.
But also like, it's like almost bizarre watching this movie because like this is their first movie. And then you think about No Country for Old Men. And it's like, well, of course they're going to make a No Country for Old Men.
Yeah. It's like, this is inevitable.
Like, this is a Texas mystery, just kind of weird, like slow-tempoed movie that just feels dangerous at all times, even when nothing's happening.
Yeah, when people are reading stuff, it's like, what awful thing is going to happen? Yeah, this was what was it? Yeah, this kind of the title of this movie kind of, remember when we did the Hammett novel Red Harvest?
Yes.
Yeah, this is where the term Blood Simple comes from, that book.
Okay, yeah.
And also some of the characters and stuff were sort of based on kind of the scary world of Red Harvest. So yeah, there's a lot of like DNA between that and this.
Yeah, some of the trivia I know about this from the autobiography of Bruce Campbell, If Chins Could Kill: Confessions of a B-Movie Actor. Because so like, if you don't know, like the Coen brothers and Sam Raimi and a bunch of other cohorts used to just like all hang out.
Yeah.
They were just poor up and coming Hollywood people or movie people. And so Sam Raimi convinced the Coen brothers to shoot like a 2-minute teaser of like what this movie would be.
Oh, didn't they? Is this the one with the fake trailer?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
And so, yeah, so basically like the part where the guy's like crawling around on the ground and just bleeding everywhere. So in the original one, that was Bruce Campbell. That was it's just 2 minutes of him crawling around, leaving a blood trail. And they took that around to investors, and they were able to raise about $750,000, and then they got some other backing that basically just doubled that. It's like, well, if you got that much money, we'll just give you the other half.
Yeah.
Because also from that book, at least maybe this style worked, but like when they're making the original Evil Dead, like I don't know how, like where they came across this information, but they just started cold calling people and being like, "Do you want to invest in a movie?" And they would just get like, eventually they just come up with like hundreds of thousands of dollars and financed Evil Dead. And then like, yeah, and of course when you find out that Sam Raimi's like a pretty big right wing guy, it's like, this is why. It's like he just wants to make his movies, but like, why does he have to get permission? Like, oh, of course he hates the government.
Yeah. Yeah, Sam Raimi's politics have always. I don't necessarily agree with them, but I understand. Like, oh yeah, this guy, I can see why he feels this way. Life has.
Oh, he's a self-made person, and then like
Yeah.
it's just all this stuff is in his way. Like I just want to do this thing, and it's like, what's government have to do with this? Which I can understand, but that's also. Well, also I hear something like, he has a brother who's a dentist who seems to be like the patriarch of the family, and like when somebody's talking about like his brother, it made it seem like Sam Raimi was just a puppet of his brother, which was weird. Like, you know, in between doing a dentist, he's like just telling Sam Raimi what to do. It's like, I wrote this movie, make it, Sam, and stuff like that. It's like, that sounds weird. I didn't hear about that, but I gotta at least something to investigate. But I heard this from the Action Boys, which they kind of spend like half their lives reading documentaries about Hollywood. So I'll just, but also sometimes they just cherry pick the interesting thing that may not be true, but it's the most interesting thing. But
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, they made that trailer to pre-finance this movie, and then they got the money to make it, which I think it's listed. Yeah, they got 750,000, and then somebody matched that, so it was a $1.5 million movie. But it looks better than what I expect for a $1.5 million movie. So.
Well, it's kind of like just the gritty environment they're shooting it in too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you notice, like you know, the Emmett Walsh, like he had bugs on him for a lot of the scenes. I don't know if that was deliberate or if they were just because it seemed wherever they were is like, oh, this is hot and miserable.
Yeah.
No wonder these people are out of their minds. It's so hot.
Well, I'm not sure if they had it for this movie, but like the Coen brothers like have their own blood guy.
Okay.
Like there's some special blood, and I think they order it out of like the UK. Because like also like in that autobiography, you get the recipe for blood, which is like caro syrup and food coloring.
Yeah.
But like you do that, like yeah, it looks like nice sticky blood, but then like bugs are gonna be everywhere. So the Coen brothers have this special blood guy, so they can just cover a scene with blood, but you won't be covered in bugs because of the like sugar in it or whatever.
Oh, okay.
So I'm wondering if here they had the caro syrup blood going on.
Well, I know like in No Country for Old Men, it was the amount they spent on fake blood for the desert shootout where the guy finds everyone shot up, the Mexicans and the other people, the American people from the drug deal. Like I know that was insanely expensive amount of that kind of fake blood.
Yeah.
Because in the desert you couldn't put like the caro syrup on there because it'd be like locusts.
Yeah.
It'd be all over you. So yeah, that could be. I also think Dan Hidea's performance in this is pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, he does a great job. That guy's always kind of been a creepy guy.
Yeah, yeah.
In real life, I don't know, but in his movies, he's always that guy.
You don't want him getting too close to people, and it's always uncomfortable when he does.
Yeah. He's probably a nice guy in real life.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of there's a lot of like predictive dialogue in this. You know, it's like these people are talking about what's going to happen. Like when Julian's talking about Abby, he's like talking to Ray. He's like, yeah, she's going to lie to you. She's going to tell you. It's like, no, there's nothing going on. And then she does the exact thing like 20 minutes later. It's like, no, I'm not lying. There's nothing going on.
it is weird about kind of the plot of the movie. It feels like it's gonna like go like a lot of places, like physically, like we're gonna go all over the country. We're gonna run away from this guy and be together. But it kind of just stays in this one area.
Yeah.
And it's made way more uncomfortable because of that. Because nobody's moving away from each other, but they make these large proclamations that like no, I'm done with you, and I'm cheating on you with this guy, and you employ this guy. And also, there was like some weird racism because like I think it's implied that Dan Hedaya thought it was the other bartender who's black. And
Maurice.
yeah, and it turns out not to be him, but like Ray, and so that was kind of weird because then that makes it uncomfortable when like they have to interact. It's like I think it's like he's almost he would have been more mad if it was a black guy, like that it's like okay, this is just some charged racism in here, but
Yeah, it's Texas.
yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily part of the movie, but it's like an extra detail that makes it more uncomfortable. Which a lot of interesting details in this movie because it is like a very quiet movie, so you kind of have to look for things. So.
Yeah, there's stuff going on, but it's just the grungy background. It's like, oh, living in Texas must be like living in hell. It's like, place looks horrible. And where you meet
there's that weird farm where just like where it's just like it's just all brown and then just this green patch with this foggy house. It's like, where the fuck is that? And what are they growing?
And you just drive your car into the middle of it and hide your bodies. So. But that was it was a cool movie. I mean, it was like
I've been meaning
to play.
Yeah,
to have that quality to it of like.
Oh yeah, well yeah, especially in a first movie with a low budget, like you're gonna have to have like very stationary stuff. But yeah, I've been like meaning to watch this movie like forever. Like I think I bought the DVD twice and never watched it. I think they had a Halloween sale one time, and because blood was in the title, they put it on sale for $5. And then there's commentary from the Coen brothers on there, but I still haven't watched it. But I think they have. I think the Criterion Collection has the commentary. I believe maybe, but
yes, it does. There's a lot of stuff on the Criterion.
Yeah, there's one. Not all the Criterion stuff has like the full stuff, but some of it does. Or they rotate it in every once in a while. They're still primarily a DVD company. So
yeah.
But yeah, like it starts out like this guy, this woman's cheating on her husband. The husband is a creep, but he gives her a pearl-handed revolver as a birthday present, which becomes like the major plot pistol. It's like everybody uses this pistol. And then Emmett Walsh is the private investigator who is spying on them. And then eventually Dan Hedaya asks Emmett Walsh to kill him. And then he's like, all right, I'll do it. And just go away for a while. And then he takes pictures of them while they're sleeping at night. And then he doctors it to make it look like he killed him. And then when Dan Hedaya is satisfied with it, gives him the 10 grand. But Emmett Walsh steals the pistol and shoots him in the chest and presumably kills him and takes the money and walks off. It's that's fucked up. That's a neat twist.
Yeah.
It's like, I get the money and he's the only witness that knows anything that happened. But he leaves his lighter, and then now there's other witnesses. Now other people know. Or I like when Ray walks in there and he accidentally kicks the pistol and it goes off. It's a very weird because you don't know what the hell happened at first. It's like, wait, what the fuck happened?
Yeah, it's like, wait, who's shooting? Okay.
But there's also a lot of they use it as an effect where sometimes they'll just have a loud bang happen, but it's not a gunshot. But sometimes it is.
Yeah. Yeah, they seem to do stuff to like misdirect you or kind of have like weird murder jump scares in this.
Yeah.
But my favorite part of this is just Emmett Walsh's dialogue
Yeah.
all the time, because he's the one who finds out that Abby and Ray are sleeping around on Marty or Julian, and he's like, well, I just paid you to follow him. Why'd you take pictures? He's like, I don't know. I thought I put him in a frame if you want me to. He's just an awful man.
Yeah.
Who like at the worst part of people's lives, he's there to offer like this kind of weird, whimsical humor.
Yeah. He seems to be happy about bringing bad news to people. It's like, isn't this cool? Like, no. It's like, well, I think it is. It's entertaining to me.
But he doesn't understand, because like Julian tells him one time, he goes, back in Greece, they'd cut the head off the guy who brought news that bad. And he just looks at him. He's like, why would they do that? Like he doesn't understand. It's like, well, when you're ready to cut my head off, let me know. He just,
Yeah.
there's
I'll
nothing.
I'll be able to crawl around without it.
Yeah, just weird shit like that. That's what I like the most about them. I was rewinding. I was like, wait, what did he say? Wow, this guy's like Satan.
Yeah, I mean, he's the most captivating part of the movie. I mean, everybody else does fine, but like it's like,
well, he has the best dialogue.
Yeah, yeah. But also he's a seasoned actor, so
yeah. Yeah, he seems to like know what he's doing and like how to present evil in a way that a guy like, he's like not a physical guy, he's not the handsome lead, but he was a good part of Blade Runner too, and he was in it for 5 minutes.
But yeah, so Ray shows up at Ray wants to he basically has been fired or quit from the bar, but he still needs his like last 2 weeks payment, and he tries to get that from Julian. And so he shows up and he's like, well, he's dead. And then he decides he's going to like hide the body. I forget why, because they find the pistol and it's like, oh, that's going to
Yeah, he recognizes the gun.
Yeah. So he decides he's going to like, well, I'm just going to bury him out in a field, but it turns out he's not dead. Not completely.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah.
I thought, is this a dream sequence? Because Julian does appear in dream sequences later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like this was the first time it's like, oh, he's going to shoot that guy and they're both going to fall in the grave and then everyone's going to get away because it's like, well, they must have killed each other. But no, it doesn't happen that way.
But yeah, when he puts the pistol in his pocket and he's like going to bury him, and then he pulls the pistol on him, but there's only like 3 bullets in the gun.
Yeah.
And he's like pulling the trigger on the empty chambers, but
yeah, she only had 3 bullets left at the hotel. She dumped them out on the bed and was loading them in that gun. Which I forget what kind of weird gun that is.
Yeah, because it's like a break top action.
Yeah, it's like an old school gun.
Yeah. But yeah, and then you got like the last, because then Emmett Walsh has to like, oh, too many people know, like I got to kill everybody, and then like the last like 20 minutes is like this, like very agonizing, like almost horror movie. It's very, what do you call that? Dramatic, I guess. I can't remember. Like tense. Yeah. There we go. Very tense. Yeah. Like last 20 minutes. And then just like weird. It's like I forget. Like he's like he can't get into like a room, so he's like reaching outside one room to get into another room. She stabs his hand in there, and then he just like a lot of cool cinematography in this too, where he shoots the bolt holes into the wall, but then it's just a 45, so it's like 7 shots and he's done. And then he just like starts screaming and punching the wall because he has his hand stuck to the windowsill because a knife is in it. Yeah, and he punches through the wall to pull the knife out. It's like that's really good. That's really good. Just little details. And he's just screaming the whole time too. It's like, oh yeah, he's just a horror movie at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, that gun is called an Ivor Johnson.
Huh.
the gun she uses. It was around a long time. It was a 32 caliber weapon. Yeah, because that's a weird gun. The first time they loaded it, I was like, "What the hell?" But they started making them in 1916. So they've been around a long time.
But yeah, she gets the gun back and then shoots. In
The last bullet
yeah,
is used by him.
but he's still talking.
Yep.
And then presumably dies. I forget what the last thing he said was.
Well, she was kind of like in almost a dream state
Yeah.
because so many she'd been hallucinating that Julian was around and she says because this guy's name's Don Haid, his character's named Julian Marty. The detective's name's Lauren Vassar, but it's never said in the movie. So, but anyway, she says through the wall after she shoots him through the door, she's like, "I'm not afraid of you, Marty." And so the detective's laying on the floor. He's bleeding out and dying, and he bursts into laughter and he says, "If I see him, I'll be sure to give him the message."
Oh yeah, that's right.
He always has something to say. The wrong thing at the weirdest time. So
It's a cool movie. It's pretty short, so like an hour
it's
and a
not
half.
long or difficult to watch or anything.
No.
It's kind of cool, very atmospheric. It's very like this is the dirty part of America that no one would want to live here, and of course.
Hell of a first movie. Like they seem
Yeah.
to have their shit together for a first movie. Because you watch this movie and you can just see every other Coen brother movie in it.
Yeah,
Like,
oh, yeah.
It's not as funny as some of their comedies, but you can see like all the DNA in all their movies is right here. It's like,
Oh yeah, I was just seeing No Country for Old Men. It's like, oh okay, just
yeah, the other one I like. I've heard so many bits about, but I've never just sat down and watched it. I hear it's so great. It's just Miller's Crossing.
oh yeah, that's a wonderful movie. You've never seen that?
No, not all the way through.
Oh yeah, that's whole section of dialogue where the guy's begging for his life is
Yeah.
great. Yeah, it's not my my favorite of theirs is No Country for Old Men, which is also one of my favorite books. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of that one's got it for me because what I liked about this and No Country for Old Men is it is unrelenting. And you really don't want things to happen. It's like, yeah, this is just going to be bad. This, the characters you've introduced me to are going to die despite all their best plans and ideas. They're just going to die horribly, and and it pays off. But in No Country for Old Men, you just have implacable ultimate evil versus like normal people who are committing the sins of greed and But that's Cormac McCarthy too, is like one of the greatest American writers there is. And he writes really nice books too. Just read Blood Meridian for just for a weekend. This is amazing. I didn't know people could be killed in such gruesome, violent, and variety of ways. But yeah, that's it for me for Blood Simple.
Yeah.
So you had anything else to add?
Nah.
Check it out on the Criterion channel or wherever you watch. Or
Yeah, Halloween's coming up. Get in a $5 DVD bin. Pick it up.
Yeah, it's one of the best horror movies you'll ever watch. Because in this movie, the horror is real. Like all this shit is like stuff people have done and are doing right now in some way or another. $10,000 seems like a bargain though for a hit on two people. But like he said, in Russia they make 50 cents a day. $10,000 is a lot of money.
Oh yeah, that's kind of weird. Like, his voiceover like opens the movie, and he's talking about Russia there too. And yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yep. They use that guy or he used them, to make a great character, depending on what trivia you read.
sometimes trivia is charged. Like it's not like sometimes the way they wrote it made it sound like, yeah, I'm doing you guys a favor. I don't want to do this movie. Like, no, that's not the way. He's like, no, I'm doing this movie because I like the part. but you guys aren't paying me shit. Remember that.
It always sounds like, just to read it, is like, oh, there was some charged showdown on the set, and then you find out, no, it was just a throwaway comment.
Yeah.
That was like, yeah, this is what I'm doing, and this is how I'm doing it, and if you don't like it, then fucking kick me out of your movie. Yeah.
And the argument stems around whether the guy would pick up his hat or not.
Yeah.
So, and Emmett Walsh is like, my character wouldn't pick up his hat there.
Yeah.
Which I'm wondering if it was the part at the end where he's dead. Like, would he pick up his hat when he's dead? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do some research on that, find out. Yeah, it was it's a nice little movie to watch with the family. There's no nudity in it.
Yeah, I'd say the sex scenes are somewhat tasteful. They're just kind of cut away and, you know.
When Emmett Walsh describes it, it's like, yeah, when they were at the hotel, they'd rest a little bit, go at it again, rest a little bit. They kept going at it, though. They were really going at it. And Dan Hedera was just sitting there, you know, being Dan Hedera, just staring at him like, are you a crazy person? Why are you telling me?
I'm going to make only my upper lip sweat.
Yeah. All right. Well, this week for the American Greed Factory podcast, this is Nathan.
This is Conlon. Goodbye, America.